They often say temptation doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't crash through the door or scream in your face. It lingers, waiting, creeping quietly until it's there beside you, whispering when the world has gone silent. That's how it came to me. My name is Amber. I was 25, single, and had taken a job as a live-in nanny for a family in Miami. Vanessa, the mother, was gentle and kind, and the children warmed to me quickly. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, an opportunity most girls my age would have been grateful for. But life has a way of slipping unexpected shadows into the brightest places. It began late one night. I couldn't sleep, my mind restless and unsettled. The house was quiet, every clock ticking louder than it should have. I found myself wandering to the hallway, and before I realized it, I was standing outside his door, Michael's door. He was Vanessa's husband. The door creaked slightly, and he appeared, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Amber?" His voice was low, almost rough with drowsiness. "Is something wrong?" My chest tightened. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my heartbeat echo inside me. I can't sleep," I admitted, my words slipping out in barely more than a whisper. He hesitated, searching my eyes in the dim light. His silence stretched long enough to make me want to run, but then he stepped aside without a word. I entered, the air inside his room warmer, familiar. The scent clung to everything, clean, deep, like wood and spice. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My presence in that room said enough, but still, the silence was unbearable. My emotions swirled, confusion, fear, and something else I didn't want to name. He finally broke the stillness. "Amber," he said softly but firmly, "we need to think about this." He took a step back, as though to place distance between us. His restraint cut through the haze of my thoughts, grounding me in the reality of what was happening. The air between us grew heavier, filled with all the words neither of us dared to speak. Every second stretched longer than the last. I wanted to answer, but the knot in my throat refused to loosen. My silence, I realized, was already speaking volumes. I didn't answer him right away. My lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, I just looked at him, caught in a tangle of feelings I couldn't untangle: confusion, longing, fear. My silence seemed to echo louder than words ever could. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly as though steadying himself. "This isn't simple," he said, voice low, measured. "You don't know what you're stepping into, Amber." I felt my chest tighten again. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't fully understand the danger of that moment. But I understood the pull, the invisible thread between us that I kept trying to ignore but could never cut. There was a pause, long and heavy. The kind of pause that filled the air with everything unspoken, with truths neither of us wanted to admit. I could sense his conflict just as much as I felt my own. I wanted to say something, anything, to break that suffocating silence. But the words refused to come. Instead, I shifted my weight, glancing toward the door, torn between leaving and staying. He noticed. "Amber." His voice softened now, almost pleading, though I couldn't tell if he was asking me to leave or to stay. I forced a smile, small and uncertain, and shook my head. "I don't know what I'm doing," I whispered. His eyes softened, a storm hidden beneath calm waters. "Neither do I." For a fleeting second, it felt as if the entire world had shrunk down to just the two of us in that dimly lit room. The house was asleep, the city beyond silent, and all that existed was the dangerous spark between us. But then he turned away, creating space. "You should get some rest," he said, his tone steady now, almost fatherly. It stung more than I expected. This isn't the right time." I nodded, but my feet refused to move. Every part of me screamed to linger, to stay in that moment, even as my mind whispered that it was wrong. Eventually, I forced myself to step back toward the door. When I glanced at him one last time, I saw it, the same war I was fighting playing out across his face. His jaw tightened, his fists curled at his sides, but his eyes betrayed him. They held the same dangerous fire burning inside me. I slipped out of the room, my heart pounding so hard I feared it might wake the entire house. Back in my own bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second, every word, every silence. Sleep didn't come. Only the memory of him, His voice, his presence, the way his nearness made it impossible to breathe. That night marked the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. Something that would change everything. The days after that night passed strangely. Nothing was said, yet everything had changed. At breakfast, Vanessa would smile warmly, pouring coffee and asking about the children, while across the table Michael's gaze avoided mine with deliberate care. It was as though we had signed a silent pact. That night in his room had happened, yet it hadn't. Still, the memory lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every glance, every brush of his hand when he passed me a plate, carried more weight than it should have. I told myself it was in my imagination, that I was overthinking, but deep down I knew the truth. The air between us had thickened, charged with something we were both unwilling to name. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the children's room when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, startled, to find him standing there. He looked as though he had something to say, but then paused, hesitating. "Amber," he said finally, his voice low. "About the other night." My hands froze over the fabric I was folding. My heart skipped. "I know," I whispered quickly, not even letting him finish. "We shouldn't talk about it." But silence only made things worse. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw frustration flash across his face. He wanted to say more, maybe even needed to. Instead, he nodded curtly and left the room, leaving me to drown in my own thoughts. That night, I lay awake again. The house breathed around me, the creak of wood, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of palm trees against the windows. And in the quiet, my thoughts returned to him, to his restraint, to his storm of emotions, to the dangerous possibility that maybe, just maybe, he felt the same way I did. Days turned into weeks, and though neither of us spoke openly about it, the silence became its own language. When he walked into a room, I felt it instantly. When his eyes lingered, even for a second too long, I noticed. I lived in a constant state of anticipation, waiting for something to happen while dreading the consequences if it did. And then it happened again. It was late, the children asleep, Vanessa away visiting her sister. I was in the kitchen cleaning up when Michael walked in. He didn't speak at first, just moved past me to pour himself a glass of water. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself this was ordinary. But then he leaned against the counter, watching me with that same unspoken weight in his eyes. "Amber," he said finally, quietly, "we can't keep pretending." I froze, dish still in my hand, water dripping slowly into the sink. His words sank deep into me, both terrifying and liberating. I turned to face him, my throat dry, my voice trembling when I finally answered. "I know." The silence that followed was thicker than any words could have been. And in that silence, we both understood, whatever path we chose from here would change everything. I barely slept that night. His words echoed in my mind, "We can't keep pretending." They weren't a confession, not exactly, but they were an admission. And for me, that was enough to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself, about the family I worked for, about the thin lines between loyalty and betrayal. The next morning, I tried to carry on as usual, dressing the children, preparing their breakfast, making small talk with Vanessa. But underneath the surface, I felt exposed, as though everyone could see the secret written across my face. Every time Michael walked into the room, my chest tightened. Every smile from Vanessa became a weight pressing harder against my conscience. I told myself to stop, to step back, to leave if I had to. But the more I resisted, the more temptation wove itself into the smallest details. The way his voice softened when he asked about my day, the way his hand brushed mine when passing a dish, the fleeting glances that carried entire conversations we never dared to speak aloud. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, I found myself outside again, staring at the glow of his study light under the door. I should have walked away. I should have locked myself in my room and buried the feelings that had taken root in me. But instead, I knocked. The door opened, and there he was, tired eyes, a glass of scotch on the desk behind him, papers scattered as though he had been trying to distract himself with work. He didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, he looked like he had been expecting me. "Amber," he said softly. "Just my name, nothing more." but the way he said it was enough to make my heart race. I stepped inside, closing the door gently behind me. The silence stretched thick and heavy, filling the room like fog. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "No," he agreed, his voice low, steady, but his eyes didn't let go of mine. "You shouldn't." Neither of us moved. The space between us felt alive, charged with everything unspoken. I wanted him to close the distance, to make the decision for me, to take away the burden of choice. But he didn't. He only sat back slowly in his chair, as though restraining himself, as though forcing himself to build a wall neither of us truly wanted. "You need to understand," he said finally, his tone rough, torn between reason and something deeper. "This could ruin everything. Not just for me, but for you too." His words should have scared me. They should have jolted me back to reality. But instead, they drew me closer to the edge. Because hidden beneath his warning was the truth I had been aching to hear. He wanted me just as much as I wanted him. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My silence had become its own confession, louder than any words. For the second time in weeks, I left his room with my heart pounding so violently it hurt. And for the second time, I lay awake until morning, torn between guilt and desire, knowing I was being pulled into a storm I might never escape.